Okay, so what we've got is my '05 Dodge Ram 2500 quad cab, long bed, four-wheel drive, automatic transmission. And what I've got is I've got an oil pan down there. You see the steel stick I put on there because this truck came from Boston where they awesomely salt the roads. So I've got some corrosion and it's actually seeping through the oil pan right where you see that steel stick patch. And I've still got some drips other places. So what I'm gonna do is remove that oil pan and gasket, put a new one in, and document how horribly difficult this is. So yeah. First step is, of course, drain the oil, because that'd be awesome to pull the pan off and have it dump oil all over you. And then after we do that, we're gonna start removing bolts. Now, this plate right here, this thing here has got these bolts here, there's one here, then there's another couple up there. That has to come off because up under inside there are the mounting bolts for the top end of this oil pan, and then they, you know, continue around and down out there. I know the angle's funky, but I'm sitting on my back. So we're gonna start by removing that. Okay, so I got that piece off, so now you can actually see those bolts down there right next to the transmission. So the next step is take off, yeah, sorry, looking at this from upside down, I'm underneath it. Take off those oil cooler lines, pop that piece off, and then over here on this side you've got those electrical harness pieces that are just plugged on. I think it's probably just going to be some pliers and just wiggling those off, but gotta be careful because I don't want those to break. But so that piece there that we just pulled off, I needed to use my air ratchet, but God, they designed this thing so it's really hard to get it in there with any sort of force. So I ended up with the bottom brackets that were down there, having to use my breaker bar. Good idea is to not try and tighten it with the breaker bar, which is what I tried to do. So, all right, on to the next step. All right, so we got all the oil cooler lines and the electrical lines off, which is just kind of just throw a screwdriver under there and just pry them and they pop off. But when my buddy Chris here told me, he's on YouTube as well as Lars Longen. He does a bunch of survival stuff. Check him out, he's pretty cool. Is those lines have a specific plug that when they go on, they have a threaded rod at the end of them. So what we did is just flip this up and the position would be counted back and then marked where those lines are with just a white crayon. And that way when we get it in place, we know exactly where those bolts go. And the rest of these are just 10 millimeter. They're literally one turn, they start to come right off. All right, well, get the pan. Okay, so I got all the bolts off, and the pan, as you can see, is dropped a little bit. And you see that line right there. That little bit there is the oil pump tube, and it prevents the pan from dropping down. Now, according to this Shilton Dodge Pickups 2002 to 2008 repair manual, it says that I should be able to remove this crossbar member. That is that piece right there. And I don't see any bolts that can be removed. To me, that looks like it's welded to the frame. So that is a no-go. So what I have to do now is actually jack the engine up just a couple of inches because I don't have an engine hoist, and it's a Sunday and there's no engine hoist that I can go rent. So what I'm going to do is jack the engine up, put some block, remove those the motor mounts are, put some wood under them so that it holds it up, because I literally just need like an inch of clearance, and that way I can remove the pan, gasket, replace everything, get it all back in place, then jack the engine up just a little bit more, remove the blocks, drop it back down, and attach it. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so as you can see, I successfully have the pan off. It's sitting right there. ugly piece of crap. But what I had to do to get that to work right is, because of where that oil line, that pickup line is, you have to get the engine up higher than you can just trying to torque on it, because if you did that, then it would just destroy the new one. So, bit of ingenuity, used a jack, a chunk of 2x4, and right up there is just a little outcropping. You can see just the end of it sticking out. That's just big enough, and you can get this thing sitting straight up, that as soon as you get that motor mount, let me try and get it to where you can actually point at it and see it. The motor mount that's right there, you jack it up just enough so that gets loose, loosen it up, and it's just sitting in there. So get that loose, jack it up just a couple of pumps, you can slide that motor, that oil pan right out. So now we're gonna remove the bracket that's holding this oil pickup line on, get this gasket off, and start reassembling it, and we're in business. All right, so we got the gasket out. Interestingly enough, my son's little hammer right there that I got him at, Lowe's for just a couple bucks for a little project, so me and him could work together, and he loves the thing. Worked out perfect, because we just used a chunk of wood. When we pulled it out, see, Chris is showing that chunk of wood. When we first pulled it out, the front part of it released pretty well, actually. We had a little bit of a gap right up there. So we just slid that one down each side, just right down these sides here and over there, and just kind of tapped it in with the hammer, and the entire thing kind of popped loose. And then, good thing about this pan, it's got a lot of holes. You can just kind of grab it and pry on it. And we grabbed just a chunk of wood like this, just a shim, got it inside there, and popped the rest of it out. So now we're gonna go through and use some steel wool to clean up that edge and make sure we get everything nice and clean, so that we can start putting this thing back together. Yeah. All right, so after using little scraper blades to get the rest of the gasket off, just went over it with some steel wool. There's a chunk of it right there. I had some quadruple aught steel wool, which is really super fine, which is really good. So now that we got all that off, now it's time to actually start reassembling, putting some gaskets back in place. Okay, so we've obviously got the new gasket in place. It's not actually attached. You can see there's a gap there. We got the pieces there that you screw in. They're little plastic pieces, so you can kind of get it up and in position. This is the oil pickup line. I cleaned that thing off really well. It was so gunky, and there was junk all up in that filter there. So got that all cleaned off. Problem is this, the RTV sealant you're going to be using on, you'll see on the gasket, those little hex marks, or the cross hatches there. There's one there, and then there's one on each side of the front, on the top and bottom, that needs the RTV sealant. Problem is that stuff starts setting up in like 5 minutes, skims up in 15. So we basically have to get everything kind of setting here and in place, ready to go before we crack that thing open and put that stuff on. So just kind of getting everything set up here, and then that's why we're not going to be able to do a video of actually installing any of this, because we've literally got 5 minutes before this stuff starts to set up. So yeah, that's the next step. See how it goes. Yo, so this is the oil pan all in place, everything back together. Unfortunately, we weren't able to show you some of the stuff that had to go into getting this actually in place, because the RTV sealant, like I mentioned, was gonna just set up too quickly for us to make any videos about it. So what we ended up doing, because this bolt here, let me back up a little bit, this bolt here, no, this one, So these front two ones, and then there's two at the very back. You have to have these little spacer pieces. Comes with the there we go. It comes with the gasket itself, and they screw up in there, and that way everything slides up, snaps past those points, and then sits down, so you have a little bit of a gap so that you can make sure that everything's aligned correctly. The problem with that is that you only have literally that much room to get the gasket RTV sealant on, which is not a lot. So what we ended up doing, you can see that right there, that is a Q-tip, and that's the sealant. So what we ended up doing was taking everything, having it sitting down a little bit, and then it's basically like right there on the bottom and top, same thing, bottom and top, and in that back corner on either side, bottom and top, that you have to put that RTV sealant on. We just used that Q-tip, just dabbed it on the bottom, kind of pushed it up, dabbed it on the top, and got the front done, kind of pinned those things up in place, dropped the bottom off, did the same thing on either side there, so that you can then pin it up in place and make sure it actually seats in the proper place. One thing we didn't mention is this clip here. These are the cooler lines. So that thing, focus in on that. That thing, you have to get a tiny, tiny little screwdriver in under there to pry it up, and then another one in here to pop that off. And that's how you get those lines out. And then, unfortunately, we clipped it back together, so we had to do the same thing when we put it back in. But other than that, it is all done. I'm going to let it sit overnight before I start it tomorrow morning, just to let that RTV really seal up. It skims up in 15 minutes and is, set in about an hour, but it fully cures in about 24. So that is about it. That is the new pan, looking all pretty. Yeah, and that back flare. Ooh, there. Oh, my fingers like the sun. That back bracket right there, where you see those bolts, that attaches to the flywheel back there, and that it's just a little blocker for crap from flying up in there. Just torque that thing back down, get all the bolts to the proper torque, and should be good to go. And I will fire it up tomorrow and double check everything, and also that right there, that bolt you see back there, that is the motor mount bolt that we had to get to raise it up high enough so we can get this pan out. It's kind of a pain to get to. You literally have to be like behind here with something up there, and so you can actually get to it and ratchet it, and it's a pain in the butt. But yeah, it's all done. Throw some oil in, and we'll see how it runs tomorrow.